I know what you're thinking. Where does a girl with over 350 unread books in the house get the audacity to talk about slow reading? Is she delusional? Is she hypocritical? Is she just outright crazy? Welcome. I'm Dear Stalker Darling, and this is A Study in Stories, my cute little booktube vlog that I have been kind of taking an unscheduled break from for a while. I've actually been taking a break from a lot of social media, not on the daily. I use YouTube on the daily, but I took a step back to think about, my place in all this content. I had a coworker in marketing describe TikTok, for one, as a content monster where all it wants is more, more, more. And that's how I was starting to feel with Instagram, the TikTok, YouTube, all of the things, because they just want more and more content, even if it doesn't make you grow in the way you want. So I've decided to change things up a bit, to really slow things down. It might seem counterintuitive, but I really want to use social media as a way to be more present in the moment. And so my plan for my vlog now is just, instead of focusing on, oh, it's fall, I gotta make a fall themed book video. Oh, Christmas is approaching, I gotta make, the books you gotta give. Oh, but I never finished my summer reads. Oh, but so instead of all of that, I'm just gonna schedule some time, maybe once or twice a month. I'm gonna sit down, probably with a really awesome warm beverage, because I now have a milk frother steamer, and it's incredible. And we're just gonna talk about whatever I feel like talking about at that moment. And today, in this moment, what I want to talk to you about really suits my return, because I want to talk about slow reading and being more in the moment and more thoughtful with what you read. This is really good. It's a chai latte, homemade. I was first introduced to this concept of slow reading in undergrad. I took a class, History Through Novels and Film, and honestly, if that could have been a major, I would have majored in that. It just blows my mind the ways in which art, in all its forms, have influenced us through history and full societies, and the ways in which we influence the art back. One prime example of this is all the sitcoms in the 1950s about the perfect little nuclear family. And everyone was seeing this on their television, their first televisions. And we're like, oh, this is what we're supposed to look like. This is what a perfect family is supposed to do and look like. Versus, Jane Austen, whose books all were the result of the, so deeply, intimately connected with the society she lived in. It's Jane Austen's 250th this year, 2025, and there's been so many new books, but just talk about her and new criticisms and new things. I've looked at a few of them are really cool, but my old winner and still favorite is Jane Austen, The Secret Radical by Helena Kelly, because she goes in depth to each novel and tells you about these little details that would have immediately flag something for someone in Jane Austen's time period, but today the context is a little lost on us. So, for example, in Pride and Prejudice, Darcy has a relative named Lady Catherine de Bourgh, and to everyone back then, this would have signaled, French aristocrat. Oh, hey, remember 10 years ago when they chopped off the heads of all the French aristocrats? And she makes the argument, Helena makes the argument, that Pride and Prejudice is Jane Austen's contribution to the French Revolution, to be like love over money, sort of. I think money does influence Lizzie a little bit, but choosing love over money and class and status is radical and revolutionary. And anyways, 10 out of 10 recommend this book. Guys, this is so good. But so I was in this class, History Through Novels and Film, and the professor was a professor of Latin America and South American history, just happened to be. And so we opened with reading, is it 100 Years or 1,000 Years of Solitude? One of the most famous books by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. It's 100 Years of Solitude. Yeah, yeah. And she started our first class with an article about slow reading. And she said, okay, we're going to take our time with this book. And essentially what she did was assign the book in chunks, like they used to in high school. You know, like you'd read like chapters, 1 through 7 by Monday, and then, 7 through 10 by Wednesday. And even that's kind of a breakneck pace. But as an English major, that was breaking down, rather than just being like, okay, have half the book done in 2 weeks. I really appreciated her being like, no, let's slow down. Let's take our time. So we read it for like a whole month or month and a half, which again, in college is slow. But just this idea of taking your time with books has really stuck with me, especially like intentionally taking your time with the books, because a lot of today, so obviously it doesn't even need to be said, it's a lot of overconsumption, a lot of rapid consumption. And I say this as someone who clearly consumes, buys and consumes more books than even the average, other bookworms on the internet. Like, again, people who I think are insanely, avid readers tell me they're frightened of me. And especially since, like, the popularity and advent of, Netflix, they've been getting better at this, but like when they drop a new season for a show and they drop the whole thing at once, like people just do the whole binge. You binge the whole series, you binge the whole season. And I see a lot of people, especially like binge read series or like really big, thick books. And I get it. I do that too sometimes. I actually have been sitting on an unedited vlog for ages where I read this one series. It was like 3 books in like 3.5 days. Was a lot, but also was still enough time for that series. I could take breaks and think. Because that's the whole thing. When you're binging at a breakneck speed, or when you're consuming content at a breakneck speed, right? Swipe, 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 swipe through TikTok, through whatever, you're just scrolling. You don't have time to let your brain process the information. This is like scientifically true. If you talk to people with hearing loss, their doctors and the scientists will tell you that like they tend to have more memory problems because their brain is trying to translate or process what they're hearing so quickly that it can't like download that information to save it. So their brain is working overtime in a normal situation to hear and understand, that then it doesn't like have the time or energy to save that information. And people at the Eras tour talked about having amnesia, and Taylor said she was delighted by that, and it was because she had something different for you to look at every 20 seconds. So your brain was processing so much that it couldn't save the information for later. And, I'm sure this is why a lot of people, they'll like read books and say, I don't remember anything I just read, but I know I liked it. And I've definitely been in that scenario too. But what if we paused and took our time? And it doesn't have to be for every book. And it doesn't have to be like, some people can only read one book at a time, and I understand that. But for me, I mean, I'll show you a couple that I've unintentionally been slow reading. Some I'm kind of annoyed about it, but let me show you. So 3 fairly substantial, big books. So the first one I'll talk about is, I took the dust jacket off, but it's A Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. And I wasn't going to read it, and then for reasons I don't remember, I was coaxed into it. I think I read the first chapter or something. And it's a very summery book. You can see this like lovely gingham print on the end pages of this edition. I'm only halfway through. So I've been reading it, I think, since July. I intended this to be done at the end of the summer. But when I first read it, I read like a huge chunk of it, and I read it outdoors on a beautiful summer day, and I really associate this book with that feeling. So I've had a hard time settling back down into it without that same physical setting for myself. But that being said, it is like a lot of Emily Henry. It's a romance, but there's a lot of other thought-provoking parts to it. It's been leaving me very thoughtful, and so I don't mind actually taking my time with it. Because her characters are so rich, and the world is so rich, and there's like a little mystery going on with this one, and so I haven't minded. You do risk, forgetting when you let them sit too long, but if I know I'm going to leave it sit too long, I'll write myself a little summary before I really take a break. This one, Once a Monster, it's a Greek mythology retelling. What if the Minotaur was immortal? And what if he washed up on the streets of Victorian London? And it's brilliant, and I'm not even fully halfway through, but I started it in the summer because I just really wanted to. But I kept telling myself, no, it's not very summery, it's like dark, wintry, Victorian London. But I was like, no, I want to. So I started reading it at night because I was like, well, that's kind of atmospheric. But then I got to this chapter 15, which is, they have the time and date, and it's Christmas. And I was like, ooh, maybe I'll hold off and save that when we're closer to the holiday season. So I'm eager to pick this one up again. But, I think had I started it in this season, I could have, just read it all the way through. But a lot of my Greek mythology retellings, I've been taking substantial breaks with. But that shouldn't be surprising because it's such often heavy material. There's a lot of dark, horrible things that go on in Greek mythology. So pacing yourself and taking your time and reading lighter things in between. But the main one that inspired me talking about this today is this book, Hecate, the Witch, or Hecate, if you're British, by Nikita Gill, who is British, so that's how she pronounces it, and I'm obsessed with it. Which is just one of the most beautiful books I've ever owned. Like, we have this beautiful sprayed edges. And when you take the cover off, you've got the beautiful, it's just, I actually own 2 copies of this one because one of them was signed. And it was too precious to me because Nikita Gill is my favorite poet. And so, so this is a novel in verse about Greek goddess Hecate, who is like the goddess of witchcraft, among other things. And this is like her coming of age story. And because it's just poems, I thought, I'm going to fly right through this. I could finish it in one night. I thought actually at one point I would just read it on Halloween, very spooky. But I'll be reading her poems and her stories, and then all of a sudden I'll stop. I'll just be like, yeah, that's enough for today. And I'll be like, no, keep reading. You have time. But the little voice in my head is just like, no, that's enough today. Let's let that sit. Let's let that linger. Because Nikita's poems are so powerful. The story is so good. And just, you're just like, okay, we're going to take a break here. And it'll be a few days before I come back to it. But I very much intended this to be a binge read, and I kind of love the way it's just, this little voice inside of me is like, no. Now, before you come for me and just say, well, I, always read slow, or like, I've got so many things I want to read. I've got so many unread books. Again, over 350. So I feel you. But I actually ended up picking up this book recently. It's a tiny little republished, shorter than a novella, kind of just like a big essay, called So Many Books. And this was published back in, I saw the title and I was like, well, I can relate. But it's actually about like the overproduction of books in our world, like how they're publishing so many books, and maybe the title should even be Too Many Books. And this was written before, 2000, before the turn of I think it was originally in 1996, and then it was translated in 2003. And it's all at once like a little sad and dystopian. Like, there were moments I was just laughing. Like, he mentioned Borders. Remember Borders? I remember Borders. At another point, I was just cackling. Oh, here it is. It is impossible to believe that the book business will one day become like the automobile business, which squeezed out small and medium-sized producers out of the market. it is impossible to believe. I'm so sorry to tell you, Gabriel, but giant monopolies of publishing, and they eat all of the small and mid-sized publishers. But there's also some more relatable and joyful and optimistic quotes and moments in here. I really appreciated the ones that said, "The truly cultured are capable of owning thousands of unread books without losing their composure or their desire for more." I was like, thank you. And there was just some lovely, quotes on reading, like, "Reading liberates the reader and transports him from his book to reading of himself and all of life." Talks about culture as a conversation, and the more books you have, the more people are contributing to the conversation. He talks a lot about like the industry itself. It's very odd to read about Amazon in its beginning days, and like he theorizes about e-readers with every book in the universe at your fingertips. But there was one quote that really struck me for our slow reading moment today, and it's talking about comparing. The internet was just really coming into the hands of everyday consumers back then, and how funny is this? It just struck me how cool and weird it is that I'm filming this video on my tiny device that has every book in the universe at my fingertips, and I'm talking about this book that theorized. Anyways, I was talking about, with the advent of the internet and comparing it to when the TV got big, because when, TVs were in every home, they were like, oh, books are dead. They're going to be dead. Everyone's just going to be watching TV and movies. And that wasn't true. And then with the internet, they were like, oh, everyone's just gonna, print books, gone. And that also isn't true. And in fact, at times, the internet has helped promote more books, and it's helped more readers find books that they like. It's interesting, he was talking about like how difficult it is to get the right books in the hands of the readers they belong in, and thinking about that in the context of our algorithms these days and how that's what they're intended to do. But then, which is like what Gabriel wants. He wants every book to find its ideal reader, which I do too. But when you just search the internet and you just look for algorithms and you just go to Amazon, blah, 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 and you're just like, I want this, and it gives you that, you don't get the joy of discovery that you would get in a bookstore or a library. Like you're walking, like this book, I was looking for C.S. Lewis's retelling of a Greek myth that a lot of people don't know about. He retold the Psyche and Eros Cupid love story myth, and so I was looking for that, and so we were in like the theological essays and feminism and all of this section and criticism, and this tiny little volume just stuck out at me, and I was like, yeah, I have so many books. And it was a joyous discovery to be like, oh, okay, let's read about this. I love reading about reading. And so you don't necessarily get that when you definitely don't get that when you're, yes, it does say like, oh, recommended, but you don't get to wander different sections, see what the booksellers are recommending, chat with them, as you're checking out, and they're like, oh, I really enjoyed this, and then I enjoyed this other book. So I'm very, 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 very pro buying books in person and aggressively anti-Amazon. Do not come to me about Amazon. Honestly, one of those vlogs that I was like, oh, I should make one like this, was just going to be called A Study in the Evil Empire. And it was just going to be about all the ways Amazon sucks. All you need to know is that they personally ensure over and over and over and over and over again in so many ways that writers and their agents and publishers do not get the fair share that they are due when Amazon sells their book. And one of the first things Amazon ever did was there was another bookstore called Amazon, or like the Amazon. I think it was just Amazon. And it was in Southern California, and it was run by lesbians. Because the Amazons were powerful, badass women living, this is a Greek myth, people. We're back to Greek mythology. And this bookstore sued Amazon, was like, hi, you stole our name. You're a bookseller, and you're using our name. And they dragged it on through court for ages, and the lesbian Amazon won, but by dragging it on, Amazon had drained them. The lawsuit cost way too much, and they went under, because also Amazon personally targeted them and personally would like ensure that their books were cheaper. and they would, buy the data of people living in that area to make sure they were buying from Amazon instead of this lesbian bookstore.
Stop buying books from Amazon.
But anyways, to conclude, let's go back to that one quote. 5 minutes ago, I said I was going to read to you about slow reading. Gabriel is talking about, how with television, and this has only gotten worse with TikTok and all these things, you're at the mercy of the speed of the content. Like you can fast forward, yes, you can rewind, but with a book you can, yes, you can pause, but like it's not the same as with a book. You can very subtly go back and read the paragraph. You can turn the page and then keep going. You can, it's much more intimate and much more at your own pace with a book. So he says, in contrast, books can be read at the speed required by the reader, the mood, the purpose, or landscape of the text or circumstances. And to me, that's just really at the core of why I think slow reading and not feeling like you have to rush through every book is important to remember. I once heard someone describe your shelf of unread book or shelves as a wine cellar. You don't have a wine cellar to drink it all in one night. You choose the right wine for the right occasion. When I was reading this book in a lovely summer afternoon, it was perfect and I was taking my time and very atmospheric. And now I'm trying to find a setting that has that same feeling for me to continue the book. And that's what this book needed, and that's what I need right now for this book. And for some of my Greek myth books, sometimes I need to take my time with them because the content is very heavy. A lot of this kind of is referring more to textbooks or classic literature, but I think it really just applies across the board. And I encourage everyone to just make sure you enjoy what you're reading and the way you're reading, and make sure you take time to live in the moment, breathe, enjoy your hot drink, and I hope everyone remembers that right now as everyone's speed reading to get to the end of their 2025 reading goals, or as they're setting reading goals for next year, for 2026. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe, and please leave a comment because I love chatting with people. Bye. In case you're wondering, my only goal for next year is to get through books that I actually own. I don't want to end the year owning more books than when I started, which is how the last several years have gone.